if someone wanted to come and work for Weta Workshop, we can teach you how to do the thing, how to apply the paint or use ZBrush. Skills can be taught. It's an attitude, a belief in art and a love of creating. If something's brought into existence and there's not at the beginning or at the core of it like a deep love and an enthusiasm and an engagement from the people working on it, that carries through to the finished product. That's important, and that's what you can't teach. Art is that which cannot be taught. It's in you, and you can't teach that.
Hey guys, in this episode I interviewed Jules German.
Hello everyone, my name's Jules. I work in the paint shop at Weta Workshop.
If you're not familiar with him, Jules is the head of collectibles at Weta Workshop, and he's worked on dozens of extremely cool, high-fidelity resin sculptures that I highly recommend checking them out. There's going to be links in the description below. In this episode, we talk about his experience working in commercial art, his thoughts on trying to make something more commercial, so branding it or doing it in a way to where it fits a wider audience to sell to, and his general feelings and sentiment doing art professionally. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
The way that I start these things is like the point of this is not to talk about like how to become an artist or how to train or even how to like become a better draftsman. Is more like the why of doing it. I think people look at someone who's further along in their career or in the industry, and they might look at it with some measure of like, oh my God, that person has done so much. Often I think people see the ideal, but then they ignore like the reality of, a lot of your work is probably actually pretty tedious and monotonous,
Yeah.
Whether you're working on some crazy sculpting project or it's just something for fun, or for as a student, a lot of the work actually ends up remaining the same.
As far as being an artist, I mean, how do you measure that? Like if you want to be a comic book artist and you draw a comic book on a napkin, well, you're a comic book artist.
Yeah.
Like, so you decide, do you want to be a published comic book artist? It's a slightly different journey and it entails a bit more. And then as far as process goes, that it is a lot of really just hard work and graft and honing your craft to be hopefully the best you can possibly be at it.
Right.
And usually that's just hours, just practice. It's really quite unromantic, but it takes a lot of practice to just understand your medium or mediums that you're working in. Ultimately, whatever you're using, like a crayon or a digital apparatus, I like to think it should become an extension of your body. So you're not the tool. It's not about the tools. It's about how you're using them. And so that should become an unconscious process.
I think it's part of the reason why I think figuring out your why is so important, because dealing and working through that monotony, you have to find a way to keep the monotony fun and interesting. Because again, it's like if you're doing it for your entire life, theoretically like 60 years of your whole career, you have to find some way to make just laying down strokes on a canvas interesting.
I mean, for me, I've always been in love with, I think that my favourite thing human beings do is we tell each other stories. It excites me to read or look at other people's stories, whether be watching them or listening to them or reading them. So for me, it's just incredibly exciting to be involved in that, and I've always wanted to do that, whether it be painting a Warhammer mini or drawing a comic book or writing a song, whatever it is. To me, it's the storytelling which is exciting, and that's the why for me.
The question that I ask everybody is like, would you be doing the same thing you're doing right now if you had $1 billion?
100%.
Well, it's like I also suspect I couldn't pay you money to stop sculpting. Like even if it meant like you no longer work in the industry, you're in the middle of nowhere, on a deserted island. You would probably get mud or something and still do
100%. I mean, I'm actually a painter that's my medium.
Yeah.
But there's no way. Like any money that there is a byproduct.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the goal.
Well, and I think it's like with all that kind of stuff, people have to find a way to earn the money and keep it sustainable while also keeping it interesting.
It's the really hard part. Like I have labels in what we call different mediums and arts are difficult. But I have a separation in my mind, maybe for lack of a better term, where there's fine art and commercial art. And commercial art, and then there's no shame or better than or worse than between those two things. But commercial art is very much what I do at work.
Yeah.
And then, again, for lack of a better term, fine art is what I'll do at home. So that the commercial art is a way to be able to be creative and make art that I certainly believe in, while, you know, feeding my daughter and
having a house, having a place.
Yeah, and just dealing with life.
Right. Well, I feel like aspirationally, a lot of people get into this stuff because they want to go work at Blizzard or Ryan or a place like Weta, and then they start to work there, and then they realize, oh, okay, it's like the day-to-day is the actual fun part of this stuff. You know?
Yep.
It's never like, you know, you could probably go down the list of big projects that you worked on in some fashion, and at a certain point, there's diminishing returns on how much it validates your soul and your identity and stuff.
100%, especially in a like a film project, for example, gets split up into so many tasks that whatever you might be working on is such a small part of the whole that you have to mentally look at it from a bird's eye view, so you can see a bigger picture, because that's where the reward is. I've spent months of my life putting sellotape, masking out Power Rangers bits of armor. Right. It was like, if you zoom in, what you're doing is putting sellotape on a bit of plastic to ultimately be painted. But it's the magic is when you zoom out and see what you're doing. You're a small part of a much bigger process, and that's, for me, that's where the reward is.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's especially easy to get nihilistic about, like painting. Like, if you break down painting to its base fundamental, like it's like oil on like linen canvas, or even beyond that, it's like molecules, touching molecules. It's all completely arbitrary, but it's like when you zoom out, that's the Mona Lisa, or some crates and some John Singer Sargent page or something, you know?
And it's funny you should say that. Like, I was a screen printer for a long time, and I still use screen printing techniques. And when people ask me what I did for a living, I'm pushing pigment through little holes. Yeah. Like, that's really what I'm physically doing. Yeah. What I'm actually doing is telling stories, making pictures.
Yeah. Well, my dad works in comics, and he's worked at Wildstorm and all that stuff for a long time. And on a super reductionist level, he would describe his job as like a professional paper salesman. You know, and I'm like, that's not wrong. You know, you're taking something of lower value, and increasing the value.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it's and I think it's the subjective nature of whatever you're doing is the actual value. And I think part of that is also realizing that most people realistically are not going to like the thing, or not even dislike. They're just not going to be interested in what you're doing, you know?
I think it takes I'm extremely passionate about what I do, and so are most of the people I work with. Like, you have to really, really want to do it. It's not something I think you can easily fake or pretend. Yeah, like, you have to really, really, really want to do it. Yeah.
Well, and I remember, like, when I was down there in New Zealand visiting you guys, and I met Richard and I met you, and when I met Richard, he was madly scrawling on a whiteboard, in the workshop. And like to a lot of people, again, it's like he's the Weta, it's like working on Lord of the Rings or doing all this stuff is a dream job for a lot of people. But even at the end of a very long career, you're still scrawling on the whiteboard.
Still, yeah, it never changes. Like, each project brings its own challenges, and whatever it is, the director or the person that's sort of ultimately driving it, that they've got aspirations of what it can be. So every project you start from square one again, like, what's this going to be? So you have to reinvent the process, but it's generally kind of always the same mechanical process, but the soul or the heart or the intent behind it may be different. Yeah. But it's always scrawling on a whiteboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's, again, like, whether it's working on some big movie or, working on just a YouTube video or your own graphic novel, again, like, loving the process as much as you can is the way that it leads to those dream jobs and stuff.
Oh, 100%. And if you don't, I think there's something really, it's not tangible, but if something's brought into existence and there's not at the beginning or at the core of it like a deep love and an enthusiasm and an engagement from the people working on it, that carries through to the finished product. And I don't know exactly what it is, but if we don't love what we're doing, that does show in the final product. And I think that's true of anything, whether you're making a sandwich or painting a painting, making a comic book.
Absolutely. Well, and it's corny to say, but there is art in everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Like even like the way you drive home from work or something can be creative.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing there is like separating, status or being recognized for your art and the art itself.
Oh man, I really strongly believe that ego doesn't really contribute anything useful to it, to a genuine creative process. Like, there's nothing to be gained by elevating oneself or one's ideas to above someone else's. Like, that achieves nothing.
Yeah.
It's counterproductive to a creative process.
Yeah. And I understand why people might do that, because you want evidence that something is going to work, but it's like also like it's like there are plenty of giant projects that had all the evidence in the world that ended up not working for whatever reason, and also smaller projects that had way smaller budgets that ended up becoming some of the
becoming amazing.
Yeah.
A good idea is a good idea, and there's always I think some of the best films, or sort of in a way best anything, but film particularly, when there is constraints, like most often it's a financial constraint, that forces creativity. Like, if the sandbox is shrunk somewhat, it forces people to maybe the script is a bit cleverer, but that limitation is good for creativity.
Absolutely. Well, and I guess going to this podcast that we're recording right here, we're sitting on the ground at the San Diego Comic-Con. Like, the reason we're sitting on the ground is because the meeting room was full. So it's like the only way for us to do this is to go find another spot.
Adapt, man. And I think, I mean, personally, I think the whole punk rock ethos, that's incredibly powerful, I think. And like, there's always a way to do something, and it can be. Quality doesn't come from money or fancy toys or any of that. Like, you can find a way to do anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're also not beneath sitting on the ground. No. Even after working on giant projects. And
no, man. I'm a Metallica fan from the suburbs. Like, I'm not anyone special.
Right. Well, I think it's to trying to like remove the celebritization of people, or that like, that person did that thing. They must have some crazy. Like, they stand out, they're special or whatever, or
luck, man. Like luck, grit, determination, all of those things. But the skills, like most of the things that we need, like if someone wanted to come and work for Weta Workshop, we can teach you how to do the thing, how to apply the paint, or use ZBrush. All of that skills can be taught. It's an attitude and a belief in art, and a love of creating. That's important, and that's what you can't teach. And I sort of wondered, or think sometimes, when I was at art school, like 1,000,000 years ago, one of our exercises was to define art, and it was kind of one of those sort of slightly wanky academic exercises, but we had to think about it. And I kind of think art is that which cannot be taught. Like, it's in you. Yeah. And you can't teach that.
Well, and I think when people hear that, they think that like, oh, I'm not capable of it or something. But
no,
again,
everyone is.
Again, like the art in making a sandwich. And like putting on your shoes even.
Yeah, 100%. Like the way, like you can make a ham and cheese sandwich with mayonnaise, and you can do a crap job or a good one.
Yeah.
And like everyone's capable of that.
Right.
And I think that sort of attitude of you just try your best and think like, really it's an engagement for me. Like, have you engaged with the subject matter? And then after a while the subject matter almost becomes irrelevant. It's the engagement which I think is the magical bit.
Absolutely. Well, it could be making sandwiches, it could be drilling for oil, it could be making paintings, and doing anything. And I meet people all the time who are like incredible plumbers or something. They're like if they were equivalently good as an artist, they would be like the best artists. But they're plumbers.
Yeah. I think sometimes I've got this theory that you don't really get to. Yeah, this may or may not be correct, but I wonder if you don't really get to choose what you are. Like, I love music, man, and a lot of my heroes are musicians. I suck, man. I tried for a long time and I played in bands and stuff. it's not my language. Color, paint, design a little bit. That's my language. That's I understand how to do that. I don't have to overthink it. Whereas music certainly doesn't come naturally. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's another thing. It's like you have something that you really care about that might inspire you to start doing art, and it might not be the thing that you're meant to do.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it goes back to separating ego and, the actual art. Like for me, for example, like I got into art because I really loved like Blizzard concept art and stuff. It's like, I want to work on World of Warcraft. And then it's just not, my brain just isn't built for that, and now I'm like doing interviews in a hotel hallway, and it's like totally unexpected, but
I always, if you'd asked me when I was younger, like, what I'd want to be, it would either be, playing in some heavy metal band or a comic book artist.
Yeah.
Like, I love comic books and still to this day just consume them. But I'm also not the person who will sit at a desk for 16 hours a day drawing comic books. That's not how I like to work or want to work. And because of that, I'll never be really good at it, Yeah.
Well, and again, I think it's like, just because you're not able to do that doesn't mean that you're not fantastic at something else.
Yeah. So you find, like you were saying, like I ended up, like painting is my thing, like painting models and collectibles and, canvases and stuff. That's my thing.
Yeah.
I would have said it was pen and ink as a teenager,
Yeah. Well, and it changes, and it's constantly a shifting thing. And I think, like just your ability to remove your ego and being okay with letting go of the desired outcome,
Yeah. And it doesn't matter, I think if you're trying your best, and 'cause there's so much to say on this subject matter, but we do learn from our mistakes. So they're the greatest educational tools. So in a way, mistakes are a wonderful occurrence.
Yeah.
They can be stressful if there's a deadline or something, but it doesn't matter. It's paint, like all you're doing, it's not saving the world. Like you have to let go, and almost I think it's about not caring, which sounds terrible, but it is about, for me anyway, I think it's about intuition and being brave enough to just be free and not care.
Yeah.
Try this, and then after a while, you build up a repertoire. This works, this doesn't, and you sort of evolve that way. But I think it's not being precious. Like that's the enemy, I think, for me anyway. Yeah.
Well, I would say, like, I've done like 100 interviews at this point, with varying levels of, like, I guess, artists, and everyone says the same thing, which is kind of strange. It's like you just do it.
Yeah, I think it's a lucid. That might not be the right word, but a lucid state where it's intuition that's driving it, and that's like it's incredibly freeing. But that's where the magic is. The enemy for me anyway, if something becomes contrived. So if you're overthinking it, then it's contrived, I think, and then there's a falseness to that which isn't rewarding.
Yeah, well, and like at the higher scale you get, I think a lot of people that I talk to, they romanticize their years as a student because there was less pressure to perform.
Yeah.
And I think the higher scale that you operate at, the more likely that the project you're going to be working on, it's like project or art by committee,
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is dangerous, and there are projects that are cool that happen that way, but it's, I'm sure it could be frustrating sometimes.
Oh, and that's why, like, I have a really clear separation. Like, work, I love it, and I'm deeply passionate about it. But there are, just by the realities of it, there's financial obligations, timelines. Ultimately, it's a product what we make at Weta Workshop, and there's no shame in that. Like, I'm very, very proud of it all. But at home, I can do my stuff, and there's no rules. If I want to spend 3 years and it's still not finished, well,
whatever,
like I sort of joke at work, we quite often have a lot of money, or the clients are relatively well funded, but we have no time.
Yeah.
And at home I have all the time, but none of the money.
Yeah. Well, so I guess for anyone listening at home that might be a student, or they might feel stuck and they're wanting to get into art or start some project, like, what would you recommend to them?
Never just start. Starting's the hardest bit. And set yourself a task. Like it could be anything. Like, I mean, I'll use drawing and painting because that's what I do. Like, maybe you want to paint an apple in a realistic style, maybe like that, or you want to draw a 3-page comic with a beginning, a middle, and an end, or you want to, paint the color wheel and just learn how to blend. Like, whatever stage you're at where you want to engage, just start. And I'd recommend, digital stuff's a great example. Like Photoshop, if you just open Photoshop and you've never done it before, it's incredibly overwhelming. Like, it's an infinite playground. But if you open Photoshop and go, I want to create a file with 4 layers with a hero character, just off center. So that's an achievable thing. And you've instantly got a set of questions to ask yourself. And then if you sort of know what you're doing and familiar with tools, really just don't stop. Like, keep going and really become the best you can possibly be at it. Like take it seriously and treat it with as much respect as you would. Like we all have to eat to survive, and we don't think about it. But it would never, dawn on anyone to sort of conscious decision to eat. You have to do it.
Yeah.
Try and treat art like that. It deserves anyone's time is the most valuable thing they've got. So if you're going to make art, like, respect it and love it and commit to it.
Yeah, to try and do it well. And again, whether it's painting the color wheel or trying to make a graphic novel, to the same level of intensity.
100%. Anything you do, I mean, energy levels, but anything you do is worth doing. So do it to the maximum of your potential and capability.
I think one thing there that people sometimes get caught up with is like the forever preparation zone. It's like they're always taking some painting course or drawing course.
Yep. No, start, man. Just start. Like I always used to laugh, when I was playing in bands and stuff, and like I really love heavy metal, but the heavy metal guys, they'd have the PV amps and all this equipment. Punk rock guys had already played 6 gigs. Yeah. Just punk rock, man. Just do it. You can draw, like I said earlier, if you want to be a comic book artist, you just need a pencil and a napkin. Yeah. That's all you need.
Yeah, to call yourself a comic artist.
Yeah, you've made a comic if you've drawn it.
Right. Well, and I think one thing there is that people might look at being published by Image or Marvel or something as that's your stamp of approval for being a comic artist. But those are just people, just like you.
100%.
They're just dudes.
It's all people. Like, that's one thing I've learned. Like, through Weta, I've got to, travel and meet all these really, really established, amazing people. And what it's taught me is it all is just people. Yeah. There's everyone's a human,
Everyone's struggling.
Yeah, man.
Having a hard time.
Everyone's in the same boat. There is no sort of golden level where you've finally made it. It's just opportunities and people hustling to make art. Yeah. Well,
and I think, it's like whether you are some director, some artist or something, it's like I've traveled, I spent 3 years living in a van, driving around the U.S. I've been to every state, except Alaska and Hawaii. Those are the 2 I haven't been to.
Wow, cool.
I would like sleep in Walmarts and, pee in bottles and stuff and living really rough for a long time interviewing artists. And the crazy part there is like everyone has a problem with money or their boyfriend or girlfriend or their job or identity. And it's like that's a universal problem. Yeah. Like, it wouldn't be that hard in New Zealand to find that, or it's somewhere in France or Asia. It's like, that's like the human condition.
Yeah. I think there is a sameness to existence, and it's great. Like
it drives you forward, and I think it's like the perpetual desire to like look for the grass is always greener. I think it sometimes makes it harder to actually make art.
That's an interesting one, actually. Like I don't know if I'm ever really satisfied with certainly with anything I make. It's finished when I can't be bothered anymore, or I just can't look at it anymore. I still have a fantasy of like, I love painting wargaming miniatures. I still have a fantasy one day of like, doing that 150-hour paint job on like a golden demon level miniature. And I don't know if I'll ever do it, because I generally tap out around 60 hours, and the the impetus and the passion for that has sort of gone. So now it's a bit dead to me.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, that's possibly a discipline thing, but
I don't know, man. I again, there are people that are just built for it.
Yeah.
People like Carl Kopinski or something.
Oh, yeah.
Will sit in a room and just grind on these crazy sick paintings forever, and it's like, dude, I just can't do that. Like, it's so impressive, but
yeah, for me, there needs to be a vitality in it, to keep me excited. And then again, that's just part of the journey of just be honest with yourself. I don't think there's any, there's certainly no wrong way to make art. So, although I admire these people that do these 100+ hour minis, that's just not me. And that's fine, that's cool.
Right. Yeah, it's totally okay. And it doesn't, there's a valid way of doing everything. And I guess it's dependent on your goals. Like, if you really want to be a really, really famous, successful comic artist that makes a lot of money, you're going to have to make certain sacrifices to achieve that goal. But it doesn't mean if you don't do that you're suddenly a bad artist or anything.
Not at all. And be specific. That would be my advice to people. Be specific. If you want, we keep using the comic book artist analogy. If you want to be a comic book artist, napkin and pencil. If you want to be a famous comic book artist, well, now that's a different thing. You need to, make industry contacts and all of that. And that's a separate job, that hustle and that networking, and that's cool. That's a great thing to do as well.
Yeah.
But I think people being specific with what you want to achieve, like setting a goal, name it, and go, I want to do this, and then there's probably a roadmap.
Yeah,
there's not really many secrets in the world left. So, whatever, if you can actually nail down what you want to do, there's probably an existing roadmap. To do it. And I mean, the internet now, everyone's an email away. And it's really just trying to, depending on your goals, but if it's to be published or whatever, emails, man.
Right. Well, for content, if somebody out of the blue just emailed you and asked for how do I become a better sculptor, or how do I, get a job in, miniatures or collectibles or something, you would have some answer for that.
100%. Yeah.
And it's it's just a matter of going out and asking a lot of the time.
Yep. And knowing what you want.
Yeah.
I want to learn Photoshop. Well, far out, I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to do this in Photoshop. Well, I can tell you that.
Yeah. 100%.
Or point you in the direction of someone who might be able to answer better than myself.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have, wanting to be a famous comic artist or wanting to be whatever.
No, hell
it's just a totally human thing.
Yeah. Be honest with yourself, because there's no wrongs or right. It's cool to be a famous comic book artist.
Yeah.
That's great, man.
Oh, yeah, if you can do it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It cracks me up when people say bands have sold out. And I'm like, what do you mean? More people are hearing their music. And they're playing on a stage in a stadium.
Okay.
That's kick-ass. It's a different thing than a punk rock band playing in, some dive bar, but they're equally cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like operating at scale. You're going to alienate some of your original audience, but it's just part of growing, I think.
Is it?
You're not always exactly what people want you to be.
Oh, man. Yeah. I was a bit of a, when I was younger, there's an art show in New Zealand, so there's it's becoming quite a big deal, and I never wanted to exhibit there because I had this kind of, snobby attitude, that's not underground, blah, blah, blah. And then a really good friend of mine, said, well, what are you, you're a dickhead, man. If you put your art in there, tens of thousands of people are going to see it.
Yeah.
So, whereas currently, you're painting paintings and not showing everyone because, you're too cool.
Yeah.
And I thought, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Why am I painting if no one gets to see them? Then, I'm happy and that's cool, but I'm not really storytelling if no one's reading the story.
Yeah.
So I just dived in and I put my stuff in that show, and it was great.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, and I think that's the amazing part of the internet nowadays, and it's the thing I love about YouTube is we could just sit here and a few thousand people might see this, which is nuts. That's crazy.
It's insane, man. The internet blows me away. It's such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not necessarily being the best artist. It's just trying to empathize with people the most, or try to inspire people the most. You know?
Yeah, and being like, I think YouTube's so amazing. Like, it's generally mostly what I watch now because it's real, like it's authentic. Or the stuff I tend to watch, and hopefully, like, you know, your content is it's authentic, and it's just people talking to people about whatever it is they're interested in.
Right.
Yeah, and to me, that's magical.
Absolutely. Well, I like whether it be like Lex Friedman or something. Yeah. Any of those dudes.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like
He is great, man.
it's wonderful. It's amazing. It's crazy. Yeah. He gets like chess players and then like Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
And then like some doctor, you know, or something.
And he blows me away. I only discovered him maybe 3 months ago, and I've watched quite a lot.
Yeah. I was talking to Greg about he had a similar arc where he's discovered him and then watched a lot.
Yeah. Because I spend a lot of time in my studio, so I'll put podcasts on.
Yeah.
And his ones are great. I love long form content. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like, again, the like even in the early 2000s, the way that you made something that ended up on a screen was you had to be published on TV or something. You had to have backing. Yeah. You know, but now with just an iPhone, you have a better camera that was used to like shoot Star Wars or something.
Oh my God! Like when I was at art school again, you know, a long time ago, I bought a second generation digital camera that Sony had, and it took floppy disks. And you know, I was trying to make digital videos, and made a few. But if I could travel back in time and give art school me an iPhone, unreal, man. Like,
it's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, now people are doing like super funny, crazy, entertaining TikTok content or YouTube content or whatever, just on a phone. You know.
Yeah.
You know, they're somewhere in the middle of the U.S. or something, or wherever, and they're interesting and they're getting an audience and stuff. And I think that removal of the barriers is what's making that possible, not necessarily like any media training or,
Oh, I think it's a great thing. Like that. I love that there's a less and less orthodox thinking about creation now because it's like all of the barriers are gone. Anyone who wants to can do it. And so there's less and less orthodox thinking, and it's kind of a free-for-all. Yeah. I think it's a renaissance. I think we're a renaissance for creative thinking. I think we really are living through one of what has to be one of the most interesting periods of history. Yeah. And maybe everyone alive at different periods of time feels that way, but I certainly feel that way about right now.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing about, like, when I was in New Zealand interviewing Greg, like, I did not expect the video to do like great as well as it did. Yeah. It's like 190,000 views or something.
Wicked.
It's crazy.
Amazing. And he's a really articulate guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, but it's like the thing there is like the doing it in the moment doesn't feel special. It doesn't feel like any different from any other conversation that you're doing. Yeah. You know, the only difference was like, oh yeah, it's just like something happened there that struck a chord that was completely random. You know, and the beauty of YouTube is again that or TikTok or whatever is you don't have to take any crazy risks to keep like shooting your shot at that thing. You know. Yeah. But
it's and like every moment, if you apply analysis to any moment, there's interest in there, and that goes back to like the art of making a sandwich. Yeah. So I think that's what YouTube excels at. Right. Like like you've got an empty picture frame, and then you put it around something, then suddenly that object is elevated in importance because it's got a frame around it. Right. YouTube's like the movie version of that, or the moving picture version of that. You know, it's cool.
Well, yeah, I'm sure like there's some TikTok or Instagram reel or something going viral right now about how to make a sandwich. You know? And it's like the oldest possible thing, and it's like maybe something about the bread or whatever, and it's I'm sure it's really well shot. You know? Yeah. And I think a lot of people have really interesting moments in their lives, and the only thing that's missing is the framing. You know, is the like if somebody works, for like managing buses or something or whatever. There's probably some really crazy, interesting thing with managing buses.
I really, really believe that. Like there's magic in everything if you look at it. If you actually engage and look at it, there's a beauty in everything, and ugliness in everything. Like that, everything is rich, and like the world to me, existence is just endlessly endlessly inspiring. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, when it comes to choosing collectibles to do, like, how do you decide, like, the pose, or how do you decide on the specific character for an IP or something?
So that's a good question. There's multiple ways to do it. So, so either in the beginning, right at the beginning, we have an IP, so a license, an intellectual property. So we've negotiated a contract and all the lawyers have done their thing and blah, blah, blah. Now we have a world or a sandbox we can play in. So we decide, what do we want to bring to the table? So what's our angle? What's our point of difference? Then, like, a really common thing we have to decide early on is it, if it's from screen or a comic book, do we want to tell a particular moment from the page or the screen, or is it a portrait of the character? So, maybe not something you saw on screen, but that character, like a love letter to that character. Then there's a number of different things that might happen. Like, sometimes there's just a flash, like, it has to be this idea. Like, an idea just comes to myself or Richard or another member of the team, and everybody just knows. So I'm like, that's cool, man. Like, that's cool. Other times we'll, have to refine a thing over and over. I kind of don't like that, because I feel like for me, the first idea, that there's a rawness and a vitality in that, which is really good. So the more you refine something, sometimes it can weaken it.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much power in a rough sketch. It's the gestural motions, and then you turn it into an oil painting, and sometimes there's a vitality which is gone.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to avoid that. But in saying that, sometimes we'll endlessly refine something until we get it exactly right, and we'll decide, do we want it? It comes back to storytelling. Like, what's the intent of the piece? What is that character doing? Like, is he or she, is it pathos, or is it movement and incitement? So the intent of the piece is at the core of it, and then we decide what the best way we can imagine to portray that intent. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's trying to idealize the character, and trying to romanticize it in the way that the audience sees that thing.
Yeah, and trying to guess also, because with the collectibles, ultimately we want people to buy them. What do people want? And I think this is what all storytellers do. It's certainly in the realms of commercial art, is what are people going to respond to? And that's incredibly difficult to predict. Richard calls it mining for gold. So you have to put a huge amount of effort in. Like, you've got to load up the donkey with all your gear, lead it to the river, walk up the mountain, start digging the hole. You've done all that work. There may or may not be gold there.
Yeah.
So the commercial side of it's really, really tricky, because there isn't a roadmap for it.
Yeah.
You just have to intuition,
Trust your gut,
and pay a lot of attention to pop culture and the zeitgeist, which for me is the most fun part of it. Is just, to me, pop culture is like a manifestation of what humanity's sort of going through. So to me, it's fun to analyze it. But yeah, the commercial stuff's weird, and then you really don't know what's going to be a hit. Like, obviously you take educated guesses.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure you've had the experience where you thought something for sure was going to hit, and then it didn't.
Yep.
Which it's the same thing for you too. It's like, oh, I thought that for sure, and then the thing that is like, oh, that's a one-off, whatever.
Yeah.
It's and then that ends up being the thing, right?
Constantly surprising. Like, you think you've got it. When I came into the role I'm doing now, like, I was so confident. I thought I knew pop culture and knew the collectibles realm. No, I don't. I was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I was talking about it with Richard just earlier today. Like, it's a really fickle, weird, amorphous thing that it's a language you have to read, but I don't.
I have no idea.
Yeah. It's like the letters keep changing. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and it's changing faster and faster.
Oh man, it's speeding up. Like, I read an interview with Alan Moore years ago, but he I think it might have been in his movie or his documentary, but he talked about the human race eventually is going to turn into steam.
Yeah.
Because the idea space is just speeding up so much that we're all just going to evaporate and become steam.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, TikTok and I guess the like shortening of content, no one could have expected that. And it's crazy. Well, also like the lengthening of content. Like,
yeah.
You know, these, 2-hour-long episodes of TV shows being split up into 10 different episodes and people binging the whole thing.
That's crazy, man. Even like movies. When I was a kid, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Now 3 hours is pretty standard.
Yeah, very normal, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's part of the reason why like Lord of the Rings has stood the test of time is because it's so ridiculously long, It's
yeah, and I feel like most of the people I talk to anyway, it seems like it's only the extended editions that are really watched.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. It's 12 hours.
I have an old group of friends that will sit down every year all together and they'll watch them back to back, including the Hobbit movies. So they'll watch it sequentially and it's like, what the heck? That's crazy.
It's a dedication, man. My wife and I used to watch Lord of the Rings sort of annually, maybe. Like it wasn't a ritual as such, but we'd always revisit it. That's become a little less so. I'm so surrounded by Middle-earth. It's hard
to love it.
I've watched, when we do a collectible, we have the costumes and the swords and the props and, they're invaluable, but really I watched the film because that's what everybody saw. I've probably watched Lord of the Rings now in scene by scene. Like I'll watch a scene for reference, 100 times. So that those films I've become very, very familiar with.
Yeah, frame by frame. And
yeah.
Well, and it's like, it's been 22 years.
25 nearly. The 25th anniversary is coming up.
Yeah, which is crazy. And it's still like, a movie that people are constantly quoting and talking about and stuff.
Oh, man, the imprint it made on culture is amazing. Like we did a panel at Comic-Con last year and we genuinely didn't know how much interest there'd still be. And the queue went out the door, down the steps, round and round. And like that's a really great thing, like seeing how important, when you do something, like Lord of the Rings is a wonderful example, but when you do something and then it has an impact on someone's life, and in a positive way, like that's unreal. Like that's a really, really cool feeling.
It's crazy. Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes back to the, like, you don't know what's gonna, like, I'm sure in the making of that movie, there's a lot of things that are like, I don't know if this is going to hit. I have no idea.
I'd imagine so. That was all before my time. Like I've painted a lot of the collectibles, but I mean, I work with, Daniel Feltner and Jamie Beswarwick and a lot of the, people that were around, and they say no one knew if it was going to work.
Yeah.
But this is crazy, but look what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine Star Wars was the same when George Lucas was doing that. I've read, interviews to that effect.
Well, famously, it was like a Flash Gordon thing. He couldn't get the license to Flash Gordon, so he made Star Wars instead. I think that's
well, I haven't heard that one, but amazing.
Well, it's like I think everything starts out by copying other people or emulation.
Yeah, 100%.
Every single thing. Like I think I talked about this in the Greg interview. Tolkien was just trying to create English lore, English folk tales. Like English didn't really have legends in the same way that maybe Egypt did or Native American culture or something. So he's just doing his own version of that, and it was more of an academic exercise than like a work of fiction. It felt like, and it's become something that's
That's interesting. So I read The Dark Tower recently by Stephen King. That series, and Stephen King said the same thing. Is that The Dark Tower he wanted an American Lord of the Rings, like a truly American Lord of the Rings,
right?
And that was his attempt at that was The Dark Tower.
Well, and I think that things like that are always crazy. It's like you're emulating something else. You're trying to reach some archetypal chord, but it's like, George Lucas trying to create Flash Gordon ends up becoming something entirely different.
Else, yeah. But see, that's cool too. Like that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like they had a specific thing they were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And they started on a journey with a specific idea, and of course they always morph and change and generally take on a life of their own. But they knew starting with a purpose, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And then also being brave or wise enough or aware enough that when it does start to morph and change, to follow it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it always goes back to trusting yourself and just being okay with, I guess, putting together the sandwich.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know. How long have we been going for?
40.
Cool. I'm down to kind of cut it there if you want.
Yeah, cool, man.
Cool. Do you want to tell people how to follow you? And I guess.
Sure. Hey, guys. I'm not really hugely active on social media, but I am on Instagram, Jules Oblivion. But if you just look up Jules German, you'll find me. Hit me up. I'm always happy to talk. Cool.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Cool. Appreciate it. Okay.
Wicked.
Cool. Cut up there.
Boss ass bitch. Boss. Boss ass. Boss. Boss ass. Boss ass.